All right. Hello, hello, hello. For the sake of time, we're just going to get rolling right away. Um, for those of you who have just joined us, my name is Cindy Stansbury. I'm the Assistant Director of the J Los Angeles Early Childhood Center, and I'm going to be presenting today a little bit about bringing justice-focused curriculum into classrooms. And we're going to go from there. So when I get started, please let me know if any of the sound isn't working or anything like that. Feel free to turn on your cameras if you're able. It's nice to be able to look at some faces when I'm talking. And we will continue from that space. All right, I think everybody is logged on and ready to go.
Hi, Cindy. Just checking in to make sure you're okay. I see you're
Ready to go.
coming in. Okay. I'm trying to get my other one up and started. So it looks like you are good and you have hosting privileges. And so I'm going to leave again and I'll check in a little bit just to make sure things are going smoothly. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit about bringing social justice into our classroom spaces and how to incorporate that into everyday curriculum. And so this is something that I present on and something that I've done in my own school personally and have taught in a classroom space. And so I'm really excited to share it with all of you. So first, I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to ask if anyone feels like they're able to participate or share, talk a little bit. I wanted to hear from you what you're hoping to get out of this session and what sort of prejudgments you're coming to it with. What are you expecting to learn if anyone is able to share? Also, I'm not necessarily able to see all of you at once. You can just shout out.
I was going to say, hi, Cindy, good to see you. Um, I was going to say, I think sometimes we might have the misconception that children are too young to learn about social justice and kind of we have to tell them what it is. So I'm interested to see how we can, shift that paradigm or misconception and look at ways that we can um, meet students where there are even little ones and um, how we can expose them to those concepts even at a young age.
Amazing. Yes, definitely. How we can meet them where they're at and be able to bring this down to their level and have it in their classroom spaces.
Exactly.
Thank you. All right. If nobody else wants to share, I'm going to keep going for the sake of time, and we'll do more questions and things at the end. So this loud and annoying noise is a nice way to demonstrate what your brain looks like when it is looking at difference. Researchers in the field tell us that the same way that we respond to somebody that looks different from us or has a family member that is different from our family member, way of living that's different from our way of living, your brain goes into fight or flight. This is just sort of your chemical response. And so the idea behind this entire curriculum, the idea behind this entire way of thinking, especially in early childhood education, is to almost undo the way that your brain is responding to difference, the way that your brain is perceiving somebody else within the world. And so we want to make sure that our young people are developing in a way that they can see someone who looks different from them, who has a culture that is different from them, or maybe a family that is different from theirs, and react in a purely positive way, as opposed to, again, this immediate fear. And so we're going to talk a little bit about biases first to kind of get us into the mindset of why this is important in early childhood education and why this is so vital. A little bit of explicit versus implicit bias. In case you're not familiar with those terms, explicit means sort of the really blunt, I'm being racist or homophobic. I'm being really unkind in a very obvious way. Implicit are those little things that people say, the little things that classroom teachers say, the little things that adults say in the presence of children that are giving them a picture of the world. Who wants to go to the dress up area and asking the girls in the classroom if they want to go kind of thing. The things that are more on a lower level, kind of that microaggression space. which brings me to that. So asking questions like this or having these comments in a classroom space are something we really want to get away from. So telling somebody they must be so good at math based on their cultural makeup, saying that you do not see color. You do see color. We all see color. And so not validating someone's past experience or their family experience is something that is not spectacular also, and is another form of implicit bias. You speak so well, you don't look gay, you're so fast for a girl, where are you actually from? Asking these questions of our students or these questions of our coworkers is something that we really want to move away from. Whether they are negatively intentioned or not, it's still something that hurts and makes people feel a little bit funky when you walk away from the interaction. And that's what we want to stray away from. And so talking about this in a classroom space, most of the teachers that I present to, most of the teachers that I've spoken to about this in the past, will talk a lot about how this is really interesting, but it doesn't apply to me. And I'm a classroom teacher. I understand these things. I love all of my students in the same way. There was actually a specific study that was done by the American Society of Pediatrics examining teachers and their responses in the classroom to students of different races. And they had a variety of early childhood education teachers, so more first grade on down, looking at students on a screen. They were asked to watch the students for behaviors. It was a white girl and a white boy and a black girl and a black boy. And then they used technology on the computer to be able to track the teacher's eyes to see who they were watching. And it was found that for the teachers, most of the time, they spent the duration of this experiment watching the black boy, even though there were no negative behaviors that were coming from him. But this was just, again, their unconscious biases, the way that they see with the world. And this is because, according to them, racism is a socially transmitted disease that's passed down through generations. This is just something that is happening in our world and is passed down from interaction to interaction, from parent to child, from grandparent to parent, so on and so forth. It's just something that is all encompassing. And so we really want to make sure that when we are entering into this type of curriculum in our classroom spaces, we are acutely aware of this and really understanding where we are coming at it from as adults. And so children experience this too. So I'm actually going to show you a little bit of a video to give you more of a window into this.
Race, listen. If you have the same skin, you can play together. But if you don't have the same skin, you can't play together.
So why can't you play together if you have different color skin?
Because your mom might not want you to play with that friend.
It's okay to tell people that they can't be your friend because of the color of their skin?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that okay?
Because your mom will not want them to be the same, be a different color friends. Not. Probably because you might get in trouble.
Why would a parent want you to get in trouble if you wanted someone to come over to your house who is a different skin color?
Probably because they don't know.
So I'm going to pause it right there. But with all of these students, this was a project that CNN did. They traveled to different schools where there was diversity occurring within the classroom spaces. These were students that are growing up not just in areas that are more monocultural. These areas where they're familiar with difference and difference is a part of their everyday, but teachers aren't teaching to it. And these were the responses that they got. These are the children comfortability with difference and freezing my internet connection. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Good. Okay.
It's good now.
Okay, perfect. I know that we had a brief minute there. Anyway, so the idea behind all of these is that they were getting.
Why not?
Race, listen.
And this is because children, again, are people in the world. They're people that are taking in everything that's around them. And starting from birth on the way on up, they are thinking and evaluating race and the way that we interact with race. And so just like we were saying at the start of the presentation, at birth, babies are looking at all people equally, but they're really looking at the faces of their caregivers and creating an expectation of the world. And so that means by the time that they get to, for example, 2 years old or about that 30-month mark, they're using race to pick their playmates. By the time that they're 4 and 5, they're exhibiting racial prejudice. These are things that have been intensely studied and seen over and over and over again, and that I've personally seen in my classroom spaces with the students that I have. Unless we are teaching to difference, unless we are speaking about this in our classroom spaces, the children are still forming judgments based on what they see in a supermarket, outside, at the park, on the news, when they're in the car and they hear things on the radio. They're making judgments about the world. And again, whether you realize it or not, there are judgments also coming from you. And so really making sure that we're teaching to that is important. And so, but how? How do we do this? How do we talk about this in our classroom spaces? So these are from a variety of different age groups that I've taught with and personally done myself, and projects that have been done in other classroom spaces, but these are just some examples. In an older classroom space, something that I absolutely love is doing a self-portrait project. A lot of this begins, these skin color conversations in particular, begin with positive self-identity and then positive identity of friends. And so where you want to start is really making sure that everybody feels great about who they are on their inside space and their outside space, and then they can look at their friends and feel good about them as well. And so doing something like a split face self-portrait. On the bottom, I had to unfortunately black out the faces of my students to make sure that, again, they're not a part of this presentation, but having one side be theirs and then try and match their skin color and their hair color. And then a few weeks later, moving on and doing this with a friend's photo and doing a portrait of them and talking about skin color in that way and really being able to evaluate that. And so that also comes with maybe looking at those skin tone markers and crayons and things like that and talking all about the different colors that are in that pack, or mixing your own colors. I've had people do it with different colors of spice and water, and being able to make different colors that way is a nice and kind of cost-efficient way to do that in our classroom spaces. And then also just including it in everything that you do and everything that we're talking about, bringing up the racial element. So for example, we had a classroom who was talking about potato chips at lunch. The kids were really into potato chips. This is what they were talking about. And then so during the school day, it was you know who invented the potato chip was George Speck. George Speck was a person of color. We're going to talk all about this person and examine something that we love and tell a positive story about someone who is a person of color in our classroom spaces and incorporating that into the lesson. In a space where students are writing, a nice thing to be able to do is to take lessons learned from those stories and then have the kids learn how to write those words. So for example, I had a classroom that was learning about Jean-Michel Basquiat, who is an artist and also a person of color who does a lot of artwork surrounding themes of segregation. And so the kids learned how to write the word segregation. And while you're learning how to write this word and practicing these letters, having those conversations just openly and honestly with the students is an amazing thing to be able to do. And you'll be surprised how much they're able to comment and talk about and understand. But the idea behind all of this is that positive self-identity, positive identity of friends, and then just openness and honestness surrounding these kinds of conversations and just having them with the students. But obviously, this is about social justice in general. It's not just about race. There's so many other things that make us different from one another and also change the way that we see the world. And so a lot of this has to do with also gender. And talking about gender in our classroom spaces, this is something that has come up a lot, and unkindness that results in response to children who are gender nonconforming, or families that have people that in them that are gender nonconforming, or different types of families in general. And so just so you know, some gender background facts, because again, as we were saying before, part of this is being in the know and unlearning the biases that we have. Most children typically develop the ability to recognize and label stereotypical gender groups, such as girl and women and feminine and boy and man and masculine, between 18 and 24 months. And most children are able to identify their own gender by age 3. And so this is something that is happening right in that prime education space, right in that early childhood education time. They are looking at everyone all around them. They're looking how they identify gender-wise, and then they're thinking about how they feel, and they're making a judgment call. whether or not they feel like they can fully reveal themselves to the world, whether or not they feel comfortable in their own skin, and who they are. And so there's a really amazing activist who has a quote that I love, and it's, "Gender is the poetry we write with the language that we are given." And so the idea behind this portion of the curriculum, particularly when we're talking about justice in terms of gender, we really need to be able to give our students the language. And so again, just as we were saying before, having a positive talk about it and give them the language surrounding these topics, and then having a positive identity of friends, having them be able to talk to their friends about what their pronouns are, how they like to present themselves to the world, are all important pieces of this puzzle. And language matters response to this in the classroom spaces. So most of this learning happens through just everyday interaction. If you're dealing with children, children talk about going to the bathroom all the time. Talking about penises and vaginas is something that comes up 1,000% of the day, especially with little kids. And so when you are speaking to them and talking to them, making sure not to put absolutes on things is really important. For example, I had a pediatrician that actually tipped me off to this one that said, you can say things like most boys have a penis, but not all. Really making sure that they're able to see the world in a wider lens than what all of us have grown up to see it as. Using this term most boys or most girls is a nice way to be able to describe something, but not put everyone in a box. So again, children are sponges. Every time that they're hearing you interact, talk about difference, observe somebody else with difference, they are watching your language and how you're judging somebody else. And then they're forming their own judgments of the world. So using your own language really carefully is vital. Just so you know, giving a little background here, this is a diagram that I give all of my teachers and everybody that I've come to spoke with. A huge portion of this curriculum is being well-informed and understanding what you're talking about. We can't teach to justice unless we understand the identities of others and we're willing to hear and listen and educate ourselves. And so a great educational tool that I've found is the Genderbread person. When you all have access to the presentation, you'll see all of that there. But it just gives you a nice rundown of what we're talking about when we're talking about gender in classroom spaces. We're talking about identity. This is happening in your brain. This is how you feel, how feminine or masculine you feel inside of your brain or neither. Heart is attraction space. So that's who you're attracted to. Depending on the age group of your students, that probably won't come up as often, but it's just something, again, to be aware of. And then expression is how you show that to the world. And so that's the outward piece. And then your biological sex. And so this is a nice way to be able to see for you as an adult how all of these different things intersect and how they're different. And so, sorry, I got frozen just a bit. Some pictures on the other side here are just some examples of some students that I've had in the past working with this type of curriculum and being able to explain these things to kids and how they interact with this type of curriculum. The most common comment I will get from parents is they don't understand. This is scary. You're providing too many options. But the reality of the situation is that students of this age group have their minds wide open. And so they're really able to see the world in that kind of space. And so, for example, I have a student there in the top right who's holding a book, the picture of a little boy wearing a dress. The little boy identifies as a little boy, but does like to dress in the more feminine end of things, likes to wear a dress. And so did this. And so it was really amazing to see himself in a book for the first time and carry it around and ask to read it over and over again. And so as a teacher, something that we can really do to facilitate this is just putting up pictures in our classrooms. Pictures showing students who identify in all ranges of the gender spectrum. Books. It doesn't have to be something where we're reinventing the wheel. It's just a very simple, conscious choice when you're putting things out in the room. And then also allowing them to express themselves freely in every opportunity they can. So for example, personally at the school that I'm at, we no longer do Mother's Day, Father's Day, we do Family Day. We found that Mother's Day, Father's Day presented us with many conversations where students did not feel like their families fit into the box. And lots of sadness and lots of tears later, we decided that a nice way to be able to do this was just to celebrate every type of family, whatever form it comes into. And instead of providing students with projects that are those kind of cookie cutter, the parent looks like this and the mom looks like this, and we get the cards and the ties and all of that kind of classic stuff, it was allowing them to create a picture of their own family and their interpretation of their families. You can see there in the bottom right, that's one of our students using just cutouts of different skin tones and different body shapes and different body sizes and all different clothes to create a picture of their family that looked more realistic to them. And so again, allowing for this personalization, allowing for this self-pride, allowing for the students to talk about this in their space. And then free expression whenever you can. We had a student here in the middle who created their own outfit that day. That was okay. This is how they felt comfortable. They didn't have this at home. I had fabric. You could tie it up around you. You can put on stickers. We can do this. And so really allowing for that flowing and changing is super vital. This also extends to talking about gender roles in the classroom spaces. I'm going to play another quick video clip.
Only 2.8% of preschool and kindergarten teachers in the United States are men. Less than 5% of nannies are men. Less than 4% of stay-at-home parents are men who say they do it because they want to. And the winding path that led me to becoming what I am today, a very proud kindergarten teacher, I've done each of those jobs. And at every point along the way, I had to negotiate and bargain with myself and push back against my own bias about what a man should be. And so now, when someone finds out what I do and asks me with a little bit of surprise, why would a man want to do that? I know what to tell them. Because it's awesome. 85 to 90% of human brain development occurs from birth to age 5. So these kids are learning to walk and talk and think and feel and be. Every day they make huge discoveries about the world and about themselves. They're constructing their own identities, and I get to help them. They're discovering what it means to be a human. And one of the tools that they have is the ability to look around and very quickly absorb the positive biases and the negative biases that their families and the other trusted adults in their lives are showing them. Which group do I belong to? And if I don't belong to that group, how do we feel about that group? We give them these answers, whether we want to or not. So the importance of anti-bias in early childhood education is huge, which is why at our best we seek out stories and hang up pictures of firefighters and fighter pilots who are women, of leaders and luminaries who are minorities. We commit to having difficult conversations with very young children about the unfairnesses that exist in our society. And we whisper to those kids in the underrepresented groups, great job. Maybe you'll be a scientist someday. Great leadership. Maybe you'll run for president. But do we whisper to the boys, to our sons? Great gentleness. Maybe someday someone will hire you to take care of their babies. From the point of view of getting rid of gender roles and allowing both women and men to be whole human beings, the single most important thing is that men raise infants and little children as much as women do. You know who said that? Gloria Steinem, feminist icon.
So I'm going to pause it right there. I show this video also to, again, bring us back to that language point that I've made previously in the presentation, to talk about the way that we talk to others, both in our workplace and also the students in our classrooms. I love the statistic that he brings up here at the start of this presentation, talking about how little amount of our field is made up of men, how little amount of early childhood education actually has any true diversity gender-wise within it. And so really making sure that we are contributing to raising the next generation of men and women and everyone in between and people to be who it is that they would like to be. And so really being cognizant of our language in our classroom spaces and when we're interacting with our coworkers is something that's vital. And so making sure that when we're talking to our male students in the classroom space or our male identifying students, to look at them and say, yes, great gentleness, and to make those compliments. For the students who are maybe, again, interacting in a way that we would find to be different in the classroom space. And so really making sure that we are highlighting those and really praising them in that way can make a world of difference for how someone sees themselves as they grow. Just not on this slide, but there are several other studies that they have done researching young children and their reaction to different toys and their reaction to different types of people and their reaction to different types of symbols for potential careers in the future. And we typically put men and women in certain boxes based on what we feel like we know about them, thinking that the male child would be really interested in the cars or the robot toys, and the female child in the princesses and the dresses and the things like that. And they found that from such an early age, there's not really that penchant for those kinds of things. The students are not primarily interested in the things that were in their groups. They found female students who were really interested in the robots and the cars, and male students who were really interested in the dresses. But as they age, this is no longer fostered by the adults in their lives, and they're steered towards something else. And so the idea is we want to be aware of that and just look at the child as the child in the classroom space and try and not let our own biases get in the way. And this is all teaching to that justice. It's the big things and the small things that we're able to do. In addition to all of that, it's not just gender and it's not just race, and it's also cultural background, and talking about that in our classroom spaces. Now, traditionally, when I do this presentation in person, this is about the point where I do make everybody get up and dance a little bit. Obviously, we are on Zoom, so that makes it harder to do, but I am going to show you this video. This is how we do more Spanish speaking in our classroom spaces, and just give you an opportunity to stretch if anybody needs to go to the bathroom, get a drink, anything like that. I am going to play this. It's going to last about 10 to 20 seconds. Okay, I'm not gonna make everyone sit through that entire thing, but a portion of what we're doing in our classroom spaces is also teaching to cultural differences. We're in Los Angeles. We're in a city of a variety of different cultures. And so making sure that we're including that as well. These are all things that you need to think about every time that you're opening up a classroom space. And so, for example, in our school personally, we started teaching Spanish and having Spanish be spoken in our classroom spaces. And it's simple swaps and simple adjustments to what you do to be able to, again, bring that representation in. So Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes is a big early childhood education song. That is something that is sung all throughout the day. So making that swap and doing it in Spanish provides them with that cultural exposure. It also tells the students that you see Spanish as something that is of respect and importance in the classroom. And so it's sending that message. And so that's the idea. Just as, again, some more food for thought, I love my fun facts. Children who attend culturally diverse institutions have more expressive language than their peers for more homogeneous settings. So it benefits everyone to be in a diverse space. And in the absence of diversity in your space, because unfortunately, just based on how the city operates and how we are, for lack of a better word, kind of redlined into living in certain areas based upon our cultural backgrounds, we need to teach about it in our classroom spaces and include it in our classroom spaces. And so really making sure that we are able to incorporate that. And so it's making those simple swaps in language, making sure that you're talking about holidays of a variety of different cultures and not just letting them pass you by. I work personally in the school that I'm talking about today. It is a Jewish school, but we also talk about Dia de los Muertos. We talk about Lunar New Year. We've talked about Ramadan, we've talked about Holi. We bring in all of these different cultural celebrations because they are what make up our world. And so really making sure to embrace that in any way that you possibly can. At the bottom, for those of you who are in the younger preschool set, this was an agua fresca sensory table. It tasted really good, it smelled really good, and it was a nice way to, again, bring some cultural learning into the classroom space. If your students are above this age group, it's also being able to bring in books and bring in stories and bring in those materials. And if you don't have access to the book, printing one out or looking up those small words in different languages to be able to put into your classroom space. And again, you're presenting to the students that elevated sense of respect. But wait, there's more. That's it. Not it. I'm not done. Talking about difference also includes differing abilities. So on top of the cultural, on top of the race, on top of talking about gender, we're also talking about differing abilities because inclusion benefits everyone. And so this is all a part of it, all a part of the justice conversation. As I get into this, the constant critique that I get when talking about inclusion in early childhood settings and in school settings is that it's inconvenient, it inconveniences the other students, and inconveniences the teachers. But just as kind of an FYI, there is no peer-reviewed study in the past 20 years that states that inclusion hurts typically developing students. This is just a total falsehood. Is it hard? Yes. Is it non-beneficial? Is it hurting typically developing students? No. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this quote, but I say it all the time. If a child cannot learn the way that we teach, we must teach in a way that the child can learn. And so really making sure that when we're talking about and when we have students with differing abilities in our classroom spaces, that we are looking at our classrooms in that way. So often I'll bump into educators who will look at it and say, you know, the child is not learning in my space. This space is not right for the child. Every child deserves to be at school. And so what needs to happen is that you as the teacher need to adjust and change the way that you're doing things, whether or not that's reaching out to your administration or whether or not that's reaching out to peers within the field and talking to them about the adjustments that you can make. Adjusting is necessary. And that also is, again, a part of the justice conversation. If we make these adjustments and talk to the other students in the classroom space about how we're making these adjustments early and often, we change the way that they see a non-neurotypical student. And so really making sure that we're doing that within our classrooms. So the first part of that conversation is being able to explain to the other children in the classroom, if that other child is okay with it or that child's parents is okay with it, you know, this so-and-so's brain works a little bit differently. And so these are the things that we're going to do. A lot of what creates unkindness and injustices in classroom spaces is students not being in the know. So including everyone in this village, and then making the small changes in your classroom spaces in front of the other students. So doing something like creating a daily visual schedule for a student that maybe is on the autism spectrum, is dealing with ADHD, is dealing with other focus issues. These daily schedules, these visual schedules are a nice way for them to be able to take Velcroed pieces of the day and move them all around, and so that they know what they're doing next. It's also really tactile and it's personal. You can do this giant for the whole class and then they all can participate, or individually on a student by student basis, but really making sure, again, that they're able to see their day is helpful. And then adding things to the chairs and throughout the room. So for example, I put these resistance bands on the bottom of several chairs. Students are kickers or wigglers or up and down, or maybe playing with their pencils underneath their desks or rolling on the ground or staring up at the sky. And so really putting these on the bottom has made it so a child can sit down and feel like they can participate because they're not worried about what their body is doing or where their body needs to be. They're kicking the resistance band. It's something that's there for them to kick. And you don't just have to give this to the students who are neurodivergent. This is also putting it on all of the students' chairs. Everyone can benefit from being able to have this available to them. You don't know what their needs are outside of a classroom space. I've also done this in the form of fidgets and hands, which can really be anything. If your school is of a place that has the means to be able to purchase little fidgets, if you see them on the internet, they come in these giant packs, or a fidget seat, which is kind of an inflatable spiky seat for the kids to wiggle on, but basically just something else to do with their hands and their body to make sure that they're not spending the entire time worried about how this circle time or this classroom center time doesn't apply to them because their body feels out of control. And making accommodations. Personally, I work in more of an early childhood space. And so on the bottom there is students who I allow to put socks on their hands. Because tactilely, sensory, they didn't like the feel of the paint. And so this allows them still to participate and get the education out of it. And so that's the idea. And interact with their peers. And again, feel like they're a part of the space. And then just like we said with all of the other ones, when we were talking about race, when we were talking about gender, when we were talking about culture, when we're talking about students of differing abilities, reading books and stories and photos and talking about those from that group who have succeeded and thrived and joy, that's a part of the justice conversation. And so making sure to have those out and available and read often are hugely important.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Real question. I love the idea that you were describing with the socks and the paint. So in that situation, do you just happen to know the students who might need that accommodation? Do you present it to all students? And say, hey, if any of you want to use the socks. So I'm just wondering how you introduce it and how is it an opportunity for all of them to use it, or do you kind of know who might need it? How does that work?
So a little bit of both. Normally, when choosing an accommodation, I'd watch the students in the classroom. So take that first week of your school year, first few weeks of your school year, and get to know your kids. Get to know what they need, get to know what their quirks are or what's going on with them. And then once you've identified that and thought of ways that you're able to help them, doing something like providing those socks, but allowing all students to participate, allows them to feel safe enough that they can take the socks if they need it. And then if, other students want to join in, that's great too. Making sure that they don't feel othered and also at the same time included. And so it's a nice kind of balance. Or for example, I have a student currently in our classroom space who uses a wiggle seat all day long, puts it on his chair during lunch, takes it with him to different circle time spaces, different learning opportunities, always takes the wiggle seat. The wiggle seat is available to all the students in the classroom. Most of them choose not to use it because it's kind of uncomfortable unless you're a real sensory seeking kid. It's spiky, so it doesn't feel particularly great. But it feels great for him. And so other students have asked about, why is he using that seat? And so that's also an important piece, explaining that, well, his brain works a little bit differently and his brain needs this, just like your brain needs whatever it is that that child does. So maybe it's if they had a cold recently, just like you needed that medicine for when you had a cold, this is something that is like medicine for this child. And so really being able to bring it down to that level. And I've seen it as it goes throughout the school year. And then you start to see the other students in the class stick up for that child on the schoolyard. His brain works differently. It's okay. He's allowed to do that. Or he just needs space for a minute. We should all give him some space. And so they start to know and learn the cues and learn the accommodations that the teacher is making because you're modeling by example. When you show them that you're able to make these changes and it's not inconveniencing you, it doesn't become an inconvenience for them.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you. That was a really great question. And so all of this kind of leads me into the equality versus equity argument. When we are in our classroom spaces, a lot of people talk about equality. All students deserve an equal right to education. But that's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is equity. We're looking for students all to get what they need out of their education experience. So that means that some might need extra support and extra attention than others do. And that's just because of who they are and how they navigate the world. And so really making sure that you're aware of your students' needs is a huge portion of this. A lot of this is done through observation and just seeing them, but also asking them questions. What do you like to do outside of school? What are you doing this weekend? And you'll be surprised about how much is revealed through their responses, or even allowing them to bring different things in for share and really listen to what those things are. So for example, we discovered a child had social issues because when coming to do share was talking about playing by themselves constantly on the weekend. And it set off an alarm. It's like, oh, that's different. I don't see this child interact too much with other children at school, but I'm also noticing that it's not happening at home. So giving them those opportunities to talk so you can make sure that you're providing them with the equitable education that they deserve. So this is how all of this curriculum fits together. We've done all the informative pieces. We've talked about classroom implementation, but this is how, and the idea behind how it will all operate. So it's a 4-goal curriculum. The first goal is giving every child positive self-awareness. So like we were saying at the start, doing those self-portraits, talking about their own families in a positive way, allowing them to create their own outfits and express themselves express themselves in a way that they see fit in our classroom spaces and having that open and safe space. And then goal 2 is giving them the ability to express comfort and joy with human diversity and accurate language for human differences. So when you're talking about this and you're doing your self-portraits in the classroom and they start to share with a friend, and then we talk about, oh, my skin looks different from your skin. And why does skin look different? And let's talk about what melanin is and why that's different. And really giving them that background to be able to have that correct language to talk about those things. Or, this child is not operating within the gender binary. What does that mean? What does the word non-binary mean? We're going to talk about how to talk about this other student in our classroom space in a way that makes them feel positive. And so giving them that joy to be able to have that proper language. Children love to take on a little bit more responsibility and love to feel like they know something. And so giving them more things to know. These are more ways to be a human. A lot of that can be assisted by books. Books are amazing. Taking a trip to the library and being able to check out books about difference is lovely and will go a really long way in your classroom spaces. And then goal 3 is each child will increasingly recognize unfairness and have language to describe unfairness and understand that it hurts. So what is the next step in all these curriculum spaces is explaining to children and bringing in books and bringing in stories of unfairness that has happened as a result of skin, of gender, of differing abilities, of culture, and talking about them openly. If you've ever heard of the book series A Kid's Book About, they're my absolute favorite. They're amazing, and they have a kid's book about everything. There is no topic too big. So Kids' Book About Racism is a staple in our school, and read it a lot. But the idea behind that book, it's a nice model, is that it explains in a very child, simple way what it is. It's something that hurts. It happens because of the color of people's skin, and it happens because of the way that people of different skin colors have been treated. And it's very simple, and it goes through a child's eyes that this hurts, and it hurts in big ways and it hurts in small ways. And sometimes it's on purpose and sometimes it's by accident, but it still hurts. And that is an important part of this curriculum, giving them the big words. We're going to say homophobia. We're going to say racism. We're going to talk about it in the presence of children and allow them to understand what it means. And so it's bringing out books and people who have unfortunately had to go through these horrible experiences and reading them to the kids. And from that, they can learn 2 things. They can also learn what the unfairness is that they're seeing around them and be able to name it for the first time. So it's not something horribly scary. They know what it is now. And then it also gives them the space to be able to know that this is something that they want to do something about. When you can identify the big bad, the big scary thing, it makes it easier for you to know what to do next. Which leads into goal 4. Each child will demonstrate empowerment and the skills to act with others or alone against prejudice and/or discriminatory actions. And so I find that 3 and 4 go hand in hand. We'll sit down at a circle time and read a story. And did that story make you feel good? Did it not make you feel good? Why? You know, that child was being unkind to that other child. It looked like it was because of how they dressed that didn't make me feel good. That's transphobia. We're not liking that either. This is something that makes me upset. Let's see what the child does at the end of the story. And then you can see them stand up or use their words or tell somebody else that that's unkind. And that's a nice space for them to be able to see that there is unfairness that exists in the world. And there are also things that you can do about it, and gives them that power back. This can also be called the well-being curriculum. This is something that has been tested out by a variety of different educators all over the country, but has really saw great impacts in how students are able to learn. And this just all goes back to children by the age of 5, in reference to that graphic that we were talking about. The way start of the presentation are capable of spreading hate, so why don't we give them the tools to be capable of stopping it? This is the whole why behind the presentation. And so this means that a portion of your day needs to be spent on talking about this and the unfairness that the kids see in the world, because a justice-focused curriculum and a justice-focused school is child-centric. So maybe this is sitting down at a circle time and asking them about their day. What are some things that you've done? What are some things that are going on in the world? For example, on the right-hand side is all of the kids were talking about voting, and people were voting for different things. And my mom says this candidate is this, and my dad says this candidate is this. And I don't know what any of it means because I'm a child and I'm still getting to know the world. And so taking that as an opportunity to say, well, okay, we're going to talk about the candidates. We're going to talk about those things that your parents are talking about. Your parents said that this person was mean or not mean or nice, and why? Most of the time, those lead into those conversations surrounding racism and surrounding homophobia and surrounding transphobia and all of those different forms of hate. And so being able to talk to them about that. maybe this person said something that was not so kind in a debate and your parent was upset with them. They were upset with them because the comment was not kind to those who are neurodivergent. What does it mean to be hateful of that? Well, in the past, people have been not so kind to those whose brains work a little bit differently because it was harder for other people to understand how they interacted with the world. And then you can give some examples. But what those people did about it is that they stood up and they used their voice. And these are things that you can do. You can make a sign, you can write a letter, you can vote. You can practice voting, and we can do that in the classroom. We can talk about what a protest is, and we can make that art with our feet if your school is amenable to that and able to make that kind of mess, or talk about another way to learn what protest means, but really giving them that ability to express their thoughts. And so, for example, we had a curriculum in which the children at the end of it were writing their own story in their own books. So inspired by the books that we read. And so this is something that one of our students wrote is I drew Rosie. I'm assuming this was influenced by Rosie the Riveter. And she says votes for women and her muscle is showing. And also she has black skin and that's so cool. And this is the character that she made. And so it's just from having these open conversations and showing them pictures of Rosie the Riveter and what she did. And, you were talking about how your mom was going to work. This was a symbol that was made when women were being encouraged to go to work. And why weren't women working? And what was going on, and that I would have to stay home if I was a girl, and talking about those things. One conversation leads into the next. And so not dancing around it, just really being direct as humanly possible. Children will never be able to stop unfairness if we do not give them the language to identify it. And so again, not shying away from that language, not dancing around it, really saying the words homophobia, racism, transphobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia out loud. But the most common question that I get when I do all of these things is talking about parents and politics. How in the world are you supposed to navigate this in a political situation right now that is just tense and kind of untenable? But it's focusing on the reason, not the politics. We're an advocate for our students, and so being able to say that I'm doing this to create a kinder human. Your child is a citizen of the world. We teach this because it is how they can be kinder to other students in our classroom and our classroom community. It's not about politics. And so really holding firm in that stance. It's about kindness. It's hard to argue with a teacher that is saying, I'm teaching your child to be kind to other students that they interact with during the day. And it's as simple as that. And so really going from there. In our workplaces, though, this also comes up. We are also in workplaces with lots of other humans. And microaggressions happen, whether or not it's people that are higher ups in organizations or people that are our coworkers. And so when we are interacting with adults who are maybe not being so kind, or even parents who, in response to our curriculum and the way that we're talking about justice in a classroom, are not being so kind, think about calling out. I think about calling in and not calling out. So being able to tell them, how about you come on in and we talk about it? Let's sit down and have a meeting. I'm going to show you what we're doing. And most of the time when you react in a way that's not saying, you're being just absolutely mean and terrible and I'm not going to talk to you, fosters a nicer conversation and a nicer opportunity for growth. A number of years ago, we had a parent that was just having a really hard time getting past talking about gender and same-sex couples in our classroom spaces. And he came in and sat with our director for hours and hours and hours and hours and just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. And he was just working through it. This was a space where he was learning how to get to the space that his child was at and seeing the world. And so being able to invite somebody in makes them feel less defensive. And so that's something that is a huge piece of advice as you go on and bring this into your career. But still, in our schools, why? Because representation matters. Children cannot be what they cannot see. We want to make sure that we are showing them a version of the world that leaves them with a myriad of possibilities for who they can be. And so that's why it's super important to expose them to it. Anti-bias curriculum benefits everyone. And just so you know, when you're picking out your children's book, this is kind of my final PSA. You're looking for books for your classrooms. You saw this great presentation. You're so inspired. As you go on and into the professional world, you want to bring these in, be aware of the books that you're looking at. Just so you know, as recently as 2020, they did this study about representation in children's books, and they were 41% white and 29% animals before showing people of difference, which is horribly heartbreaking, and just a reminder to make sure that when you're picking out a book for your classroom, to look through it and to take note of the diverse characters within the story, making sure that it's not perpetuating any minority myths, that it's written by someone that's from that community, and doing your homework on the book before you present it to the kids. Now, I do have a short video. We have a student from one of our classroom spaces a number of years ago who's allowed me to use this video. This was a child who, in the wake of the George Floyd protests, we did a lot of this education with, and her parents put together this nice video when she was talking about the things that she learned. Her parents also own a company that's called Bounce, which is why they also used it on their website.
Everybody's skin is. It's okay because there's brown skin, there's white skin, there's black. Skin. That should be sad, but something is good. But I want this community to be nice.
For the sake of time, I'm going to stop it there, but she does go on to talk a little bit about different colors of skin and different colors of eyes and background, and she is 4 years old and completely confident and well-versed in being able to talk about these things, and so that's the goal. I'm going to stop my share and open it up right now, as it is 11:52. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, anything that they wanted to ask about. Amazing. Well, it was a pleasure being able to sit down and talk with all of you. I'm going to put in the chat here my email address.
Are you taking questions?
I am taking questions.
So, for example, if a student needs a lot of accommodations, at what point is it too many accommodations that we need to reach out to someone else for guidance, whether it's the best environment for them or not? Or do we just go on like an unlimited accommodation, or do we then is an IEP or a 504 within each learning environment? Is that the guideline, or is there like a rule of thumb for us to, keep an eye out for?
So what I will typically do is, as you get to know a child in your classroom space, if you're able to make the accommodations and you can feel like the classroom day is able to flow after like a month or so, give it some time for the child to be able to sit down and adjust, and they're not presenting with a danger to you or anyone else in the classroom space, isn't physically hurting them, is kind of the line. When I get to a space where I notice that a child is getting into an area where I feel like my staff or the other students in the classroom are in physical danger because this child in particular is having a harder time controlling their body, then it's when you call in for outside help. Now, I never say that it's too many accommodations or maybe this is not the best space for them without being able to provide some sort of space. As someone who has dealt with a lot of parents who have gone through this, it's really hard to be able to tell someone, and impossible to be able to tell someone, your child doesn't belong here. Well, where does my child belong? And so being able to walk them through that process is something that's really important as an educator. And so then it's the next steps of talking about evaluation and talking about a behavioral aid and getting those next steps. But typically it's at the threshold of causing a danger to themselves, causing a danger to others in the classroom space. And that's when it's we need to make sure that we're getting in some outside help here. And there's some great programs that you can use with that and people that you can talk to for private agencies and as well as public ones.
Thank you for answering that. And then one quick question. Are you going to be sending verification of attendance emails or anything along those lines?
And so we have some guidelines on that from the from the presenter kind of organization, and so they'll get in touch with you that way. They won't come from me directly. They're going to come from the Teach for LA people.
Yes, and I work with the Teach for LA people. I'm not part of the organization, but I did send an email when I saw your question, and I don't see a response yet. But as Cindy said, you'll be notified. I know that everything's going to be put under the Teach for LA YouTube page, but I don't know about the certificates. Thank you. I don't know about the certificates, but you'll find out if you go to the closing session today. Then you'll probably be notified about how they will do verification of participation. Thank you for the question. I didn't get a response yet during this session. Otherwise, I would have shared that in the chat. Sorry.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I texted them as well, so we'll see what they say, and if they get back to me first, then I'll let you guys know. Anybody else, any questions about how this manifests in the classroom space? It's a really difficult topic, and especially with the inclusion stuff is really hard to be able to kind of get a pulse on, but it's a situation by situation thing. What I always tell my teachers though is be patient and try and be understanding of the parent. It's an impossible place to be in, and of the child, and really making sure that we're able to provide some sort of alternative or some sort of path forward as best that we possibly can.
Lots of great information, Cindy. And I love seeing the real artifacts and examples that you've implemented in your classroom.
Well, thank you so
Your
much.
school. Yeah, that's really great.
I'm going to put my email here in the chat. If anybody wants to email me or reach out, if you have I did a direct message there. Hold on one second. Get out of this. If you have a question about anything in your classroom spaces as you sort of enter, again, more professional world, please reach out and ask, even if it's something like, I have a student in my class, I'm not sure if this is too much, or I'm not sure how to deal with this, or am I not being patient enough at this point? How do I talk about this? Do you have any book recommendations? I'm working on a project. Please reach out. I'm at the J Los Angeles, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to let you go, and then hopefully I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.